Johnny Appleseed by Marianna Johnston. Johnny Appleseed. A man wearing a tin pot for a hat roamed the green hills and rich valleys of Ohio, Indiana, and Pennsylvania. He carried a bag full of apple seeds on his back. He looked for good places to plant apple seeds. Places by creeks or in meadows were best. This man who planted seeds was called Johnny Appleseed. He is an American legend. These are the bold words that we're focusing on. And let's read this caption. The legend of Johnny Appleseed says that he carried a bag full of apple seeds and looked for fertile or rich land in which to plant them. He planted his first orchard next to Broken Straw River in Pennsylvania, just south of a town called Warren. The year was 1797. What is a legend? Many people around the world honor legends. A legend is a story that came down from the past. We make heroes out of people who have qualities that we admire. In the case of Johnny Appleseed, gentleness, bravery, and kindness to others are the qualities we admire and would like to have ourselves. Stories are often told about our heroes. With each telling, the stories may grow more unreal. The exaggeration makes them charming and fun. The stories help people remember the special qualities of the legendary person. Sometimes the person's given a nickname or a funny and interesting name. This nickname usually has something to do with the fact tied to that person. Johnny Appleseed is a good example. People enjoy reading about legends or stories that come down to us from the past. Such stories are not always about actual events from the past. Sometimes they go beyond the truth. This means that part of the legends may have been made up. Who was Johnny Appleseed? Johnny Appleseed's real name was John Chapman. He was born in Leominster, Massachusetts on September 26, 1774. Before he turned 2 years old, Johnny's mom died. His father remarried when Johnny was almost 6 years old. As Johnny grew older, the Chapman house became full of children. As a boy, Johnny loved to explore the woods near his home. He learned to love nature. Johnny's thirst for adventure grew as he got older, and at the age of 23, Johnny left Massachusetts and set out for the western frontier. And here we're looking at a picture of a monument for Johnny Appleseed or John Chapman. Many monuments, such as this one in Ohio, have been built to remember Johnny Appleseed. His planting of apple trees across the American wilderness helped many hungry families on the frontier. Frontier life and times. The United States slowly became a country. Settlers from the east began to move west to live. They took land from the Native Americans who were already living there. And in the 1790s, settlers had only come as far as Ohio and Indiana. This land was called the Western Frontier. Johnny's mission was to plant as many apple seeds as he could so the settlers would have some food to eat. The lives of pioneers were very hard. Settlers had to clear land to set up farms. They also had to build houses for shelter. Johnny's seeds grew into trees that helped the pioneers get started with their farms. If a family was too poor to buy an apple tree, he would give it to the family for free. Pioneers on the frontier had to clear a patch of land to set up their homes. Often settlers were very poor. The apples from Johnny's trees were the perfect food for them. Settlers could make cider to drink and sauces and apple butter to eat. Johnny and his orchards. Johnny made his way to the northwestern Pennsylvania after he left Massachusetts in 1797. He spent a few years in Pennsylvania planting his first orchards, and in the early 1800s he journeyed on, moving into the Northwest Territory. Johnny planted his apple seeds and then waited for settlers to arrive. He sold the young trees to the settlers when they came to live in the area. The trees could be transplanted or moved to the settlers' homes. Johnny's supply of apple seeds came from Pennsylvania. People at the cider mills threw the apple seeds away. He gathered them from the cider mills, and Johnny walked great distances with his sacks of seeds. and he walked barefoot most of the time. Ohio, Illinois, Indiana, Michigan, and Wisconsin were part of the Northwest Territory in the 1700s, and in 1787 this land became part of the United States. Johnny Appleseed came to this area around 1810. A strange looking person. People stopped and stared at Johnny Appleseed wherever he traveled. Many people thought he looked strange because of the way he dressed. According to legend, or stories from the past, he was a thin man. He had long black hair. He wore shirts made of old cotton sacks. These sacks were used to carry coffee. Johnny cut holes in the tops and the sides of the sacks for his arms and his legs, and he wore torn pants, sometimes 4 or 5 pairs at once. Johnny went barefoot for most of the year, and when he did wear shoes, they were usually mismatched. Sometimes they did not fit. Sometimes only one of his feet had a shoe on it. If the stories are true, Johnny Appleseed was indeed a strange looking person. Many people thought Johnny looked strange because of what he wore. It is said that he wore a tin pot on his head for a hat. At supper time, he would use the pot to cook his dinner over the campfire. Then he would clean it and use it as a hat again. A kind and gentle man. Frontier settlers who knew Johnny Appleseed said he was one of the kindest and gentlest people they had ever known. When he visited frontier families, he would bring colored ribbons as presents for little girls of the household. He loved to tell stories to the boys and girls he visited. Johnny also became friends with the Native Americans he met. In the early 1800s, many settlers were afraid of the Native Americans. Many Native Americans were angry that the settlers had taken their land. Johnny Appleseed treated them with kindness. Johnny Appleseed treated them with kindness, though, and he got kindness in return. Many frontier families knew Johnny. Whenever he visited families, he loved to bring presents and tell stories to the children. When he stayed overnight with families, he would sleep on the floor. He didn't need a bed. Johnny liked to keep his life simple. The fearless planter of seeds. Johnny Appleseed was very brave. Bears, wolves, snakes, and wild pigs with big tusks roamed the forest in the early 1800s. Johnny was not scared to travel and sleep in the woods by himself. He never carried a gun for protection, and he did not believe in killing or hunting animals. Johnny's feet grew tough and strong because he walked barefoot. One cold winter's day in Pennsylvania, Johnny proved how tough his feet were. He walked for miles across the icy surface of a frozen lake without wearing any shoes. It is also said that Johnny Appleseed was so healthy that he never got sick until the end of his life. Johnny loved all creatures. In the 1800s, many horses were let loose in the woods to die once they became too old to work. Johnny felt sorry for these horses. He would round them up and find people to take care of them. And one cold, snowy night, after a long day of work, Johnny was ready to go to sleep. It is said that he crawled into a hollow log lying on the forest floor. Much to his surprise, he found a mother bear and her cubs snoozing inside the log. Johnny was not scared. He crept quietly out of the log and laid his head at the foot of a nearby tree. He did not even make a campfire on that cold night. He did not want to disturb the sleeping bears. The legend of Johnny Appleseed tells about him traveling barefoot in the woods in winter. It is also said that he could sleep anywhere, even at the foot of a nearby tree. Remembering Johnny Appleseed. During the cold spring of 1845, Johnny was taking care of an apple orchard near Fort Wayne, Indiana. The freezing spring air was too hard on the 70-year-old Johnny. He came down with pneumonia, and Johnny died a few days later on March 18, 1845, at a friend's cabin in Fort Wayne. Today, a memorial of Johnny Appleseed stands at the Archer Park in Fort Wayne, Indiana. The words, "He lived for others," are carved on the marker there. Each fall, the people of Fort Wayne hold a festival in his honor. Visitors come to learn what life was like for settlers in Johnny's time. Actors wear frontier costumes and show visitors how people lived as pioneers. Johnny Appleseed is truly an American legend. And then we have a glossary with all those words that you saw in bold print telling you what they mean. Creek, small streams. Exaggeration, something made larger or more amazing. Frontier, the edge of a settled country where wilderness begins. A legend, a story passed down. Legendary, to be very famous or important. And these are just some of the words that we read throughout this story. I hope you enjoyed Johnny Appleseed's story. I sure did, and I liked hearing about his life. He sounded like a really kind man who cared about nature, people, and everything involved.